about the Fusion machines. We actually have 3 Fusion machines in the county, of course, the Lakeland Club machine, the Lake Wales Club machine, and for the longest time, the machine in Bartow. And we had hoped that the WiRES-X piece would get on there a lot faster. Now, if you remember, right after, I'm trying to remember when, it was like a year and 4 months ago when we first put that machine went on the air, we'd hoped to have the WiRES-X going pretty soon. Well, some of you may have forgotten that presentation we did about Fusion and about Fusion itself, the actual transmission method. So I'm not going to talk a lot about that tonight. If you have a Yaesu radio, you probably have been on either the club machines or the Bartow machine and used Fusion before. It's pretty simple. You hit one button, you're on digital. This is all about WiRES-X, and that we're going to pick up from there. So the Bartow repeater is now live on WiRES-X, and it went on the air on Monday, January 27th. And it, thanks to Richard, KQ4KX, and getting it online. That's actually a picture of the rack on the left where it's at, and then that's where it was before he installed it, and that's him kind of installing it back into the rack. So we're going to talk about WiRES-X, and WiRES-X is mainly a linking method where it's an acronym for Wide Coverage Internet Repeater Enhancement System. So yes, it's not 100% RF. It is if you're talking to somebody around here. But I'll tell you, at least from a digital standpoint, there are times, and from somebody who used to work the midnight shift for a while, I can tell you that you're not bringing up anybody on the local repeaters at times around here and getting some of the information you need. So being on a system that's tied to different rooms with different interests and so on is great, because I've made friends with some people in different parts of the country who were real specialists when it came to hotspots and other things, and I picked up some things that I never would have probably picked up on maybe one of the local repeaters. So the system was developed by Yaesu to further amateur radio, and it uses voice over IP over the internet to connect all these stations. So it works by you connecting to a local node and repeater, which would be the Bartow machine, and that's connected to the internet through a PC. And that local people to the receiving station. So it uses the internet to link all of these systems. So is digital data attached. We'll talk about that later, which is not a new idea. D-Star is probably the most similar to how WiRES-X works. I'll tell you why later, mainly because of how WiRES-X functions in the network. And although accessing WiRES-X to a repeater is nice, many radios can act as nodes, and we will talk about that too. And the people at Yaesu, especially John Kruk, I talked to him at Hamcation, and he knew I was going to be doing the presentations. There were certain things he wanted me to pass on to the group, and which he also did a YouTube video of recently. It's very easy, an easy way to link repeaters also. You can use the WiRES-X repeaters to easily as links. And call signs, QSL distances could be included along with the digital signal. So what is a node? A node is a radio, a repeater, or a local radio that's connected to the internet with a PC, which repeats the communications as an amateur radio station's an access point. A local node, or portable digital node, is a personal radio station operating on a VHF or UHF frequency connected to the internet via PC. So unlike, let's say, DMR, if you're going to run your own radio with as a personal portable digital node, if you're going to do that, you're going to have to run WiRES-X on a PC. It's going to require that software to be operating. So it isn't that you could just use your radio and have it linked directly to it. You still are going to have to run the WiRES-X software. I will tell you, WiRES-X software is very easy to configure. It's very low CPU intensive. So if you were doing other things on a PC, you're not going to bother it. This is a different. This actually is a pretty good illustration of what goes on. So what we're talking about here with the Bartow repeater is going to be on the right-hand side. So you would be transmitting to a repeater which is connected to a PC through the software. If you were running your own portable digital node station with a radio, you would have your radio set up connected to a PC running the WiRES-X that's connected to the internet, and you would be getting in through your own station and going out to the WiRES-X network. So one way to do it is on your own, or the other is through a repeater. I would probably have to say the easiest, of course, is going to be the repeater. So this is what a Fusion repeater looks like. It's a DR2X. On top of it is that's the HRI 200 interface that's needed for the repeater to interface it to the WiRES-X network. Right underneath that WiRES-X box with the green light is an HP PC. So the PC, HRI 200 in this case, since we're not using a radio, we're using this repeater. So first, know that unlike the LARC and the LWRA repeaters, this repeater is 100% digital all the time. So the Lake Wales repeater and the Lakeland repeater run both analog or digital, depending upon how you're working. They're running dual mode. That one's just strictly digital. So you don't have to worry about a PL tone, any of that. Just being on that frequency, having the offset set correctly, and having your radio set to digital narrow mode, and you're all set to get on. You'll need to program your radio to receive on 145.27 and transmit with that -600 offset of 144.670. So it's nothing unusual about this. No tones. And although the repeater supports voice-wide audio, you're going to want to be using digital narrow because that's what a lot of the WiRES-X rooms are going to be using. Talk more about that in a little bit. And setting a tone is not necessary when you're using repeaters. You'll be accessing it digital only. Yes, you do. Yeah, you're going to have a Yaesu radio that supports, Fusion. And so, but not so. One thing I do want to clarify, I might as well say it at this point, is that let's say you never touched the WiRES-X button on your radio at all, but you used the Bartow repeater on Fusion. Never touched the WiRES-X button. We link up the repeater for the International WiRES-X net on Saturday nights at 9 o'clock, Thursday nights at 8 o'clock, and hopefully John or somebody can get it linked up tonight. But the EPARS group, the East Pasco group, they are linked to a room. It's called the West Central Florida room, and that's where their repeaters default to when they're disconnected from something else. And I talked to Richard about maybe doing the same thing because that room isn't that busy, but we would at least be linked up with the other machines unless somebody steers it somewhere else. I said, well, let's wait until everybody kind of has their chance at getting used to the repeater and how it functions before we start doing it. But that net goes on. They were happy to have a lot of the folks around here check in. So what I'm saying is that even if you didn't know anything about WiRES-X, WiRES-X is just the linking piece of it. If the repeater's already linked and you got on and you heard the repeater going, you could just go ahead and check in. There's nothing that, special you need to do on your radio. Fusion is the protocol we use to talk to each other. WiRES-X is just the command structure used to get on to see if it's linked to a room, or to link to a room, or to disconnect from a room. If it's already linked to let's say Kansas City wide or one of the rooms that's very busy, and you want to jump in, just go ahead and jump in. Your transmission or whatever is going to go across. Nothing special you need to do on your radio. I just want to clarify that. So you don't need to know anything about nodes and rooms to use WiRES-X, as I just mentioned. The repeater may or may not be connected to a WiRES-X room. The only way you can find out is by pressing the WiRES-X button on your radio. And so what happens is, and I say no one will have an issue with pressing the WiRES-X button. Do it when there's no signal present. If there's people talking and you press it, nothing is going to happen because you need to get a response back from the repeater. What happens if you were just sitting and watching the Bartow repeater and just staring at it and somebody was doing, you could tell when somebody's issuing a WiRES-X command. You'll see those signals go back and forth and not hear anything. That's somebody either going into WiRES-X mode, checking to see if a repeater's thing, or disconnecting from a room and coming out. So it's a little handshake that kind of goes on. And I have a couple little video clips later on. I'll show you as to what that looks like when you first get on, because I've started to see some people after I did this in Lakeland and a couple things I could see that somebody kept accidentally connecting to a room and they didn't know why. And I'll tell you why that was happening in just a moment.
brand new to this, are those like automatically set up? Like whenever you press like the WiRES-X button, does it automatically happen, or is that something that's done in like the back end? Like,
those are set, and we're going to get to that too, because what some of the radios will do, and this is talking about when you go into WiRES-X and you send that handshake that I was talking about. If you try it on a repeater, let's say if you tried it on the Lakeland repeater, you tried it on the Lake Wales repeater, it will do this. It'll just flash WiRES-X and it'll time out and just do nothing. On the Lakeland or on the Bartow repeater, when you press the WiRES-X button, handshake signal goes out, a quick one comes back, and then all of a sudden another one comes back and your radio shifts into WiRES-X mode. Then if you didn't know what room you wanted to connect to, most of the newer radios that are out there, other than the, let's say the FT70, you can hit a button and say all, and it will then take the busiest of the rooms and then send a big long signal, and you'll see a list of them there, and you can just scroll down the list until you saw a room you wanted to connect to. We'll talk about that in a little bit, because even if you didn't use that list, you can manually enter in a number. You can go online. I've got a web page set up where you can go to, and you can list all of the different rooms that that are on there, and the most popular ones that are there, and choose. And you could manually enter the number if you didn't want to go through that list. And so we'll talk about that too. If the repeater is connected to a node, the node will respond and send a data stream back to your radio via the repeater. And the information you will see on the screen will depend upon the type of radio that you have. So that's where this makes this a little bit more complicated than it is, because some of the radios display differently than others, and you have to kind of get used to how your radio deals with WiRES-X. And there'll be a little bit of our audience participation, because there's certain parts of this I'll push through because some of you don't have those radios, and if somebody doesn't have them, I'm just going to skip by that particular radio. So what happens is radios like the FT991A up at the top right, and maybe the FTM 400, 500, they have a little bit larger displays. You'll get a little bit more information on them than you may get on some of the other radios. When you connect up to WiRES-X and you get that response, and you have this shows up on your screen, you'll see in this particular case, it's probably not going to show up on the TV. On the top, the FT991A came back. It told me I was connected to the WC4PEM node in Bartow, and underneath was America KC wide. Well, that was one of the last rooms I connected to. It wasn't lit up brightly on that radio because it was the last station I connected to. If I keyed my mic right there, then it would connect to that room. The one down at the bottom shows you that you're connected to WC4PM. The search and direct button is there, and that's the button I told you. If you press, it'll bring up all the rooms for you, or you could search even on a partial name. But that bottom gray bar is where things kind of matter. And on that bottom gray bar, if it's flashing, that means there's nothing how many people are it was a very busy room. So that's one thing you do need to know. So this way I might get on to see if the repeater is connected to a room, and if it's not, then I might bounce right back out of WiRES-X and might talk to Mike locally and chat back and forth. Sometimes I'll just check to see if it's connected to a room. But just remember, when you go to do that and to go into WiRES-X mode, nobody should be talking. The repeater shouldn't be working at the time. So after you answer your curiosity, if you were connected to a room, you can simply take your radio out of WiRES-X, return to normal use. You could at this point choose to connect to a WiRES-X room if that's what you wanted to do. We're going to talk about the etiquette of doing that in a little bit.
You're not, like, people sort of a bad thing to return to repeater without IDing analog. When you use the WiRES-X button, that handshaking process doesn't.
Nobody's going to hear it like it was a kerchunk on the repeater. If you weren't looking at the screen, you wouldn't know what would be going on. You wouldn't be bad. That's one thing I think I mentioned here somewhere in one of these. That when you do it, you're not going to bother. Nobody's going to know I can tell looking at the signals coming across on the screen, but you won't bother anybody. You won't hear anything. So that's the thing. So don't worry about, if you just happen to get on, you don't hear anything, you just wanted to, you weren't going to connect it to a room, but you want to see if it was connected to anything, you could do that and then just pop up the WiRES-X mode. Don't bother anybody. So one tip, some of these rooms, when you get on, whether it's the International WiRES-X net, or even the ePARS net, or some of these nets that go on the busy rooms, that one's called America, Kansas City wide. I mean, it has a list of people that are connected at any one time. It's huge and it's constantly busy. Heard a 10-year-old boy make his first contact on there the other day with a guy in England near Liverpool. That was pretty cool. But just remember, just like the link systems, like on the NI4CE system, or the, even on the link system here for the WC4PEM, tee up, wait a second before you start saying anything, because some of these rooms are also linked to, and some of like America Link, some of these people are coming in on hotspots on DMR, they're coming in off of YSF hotspots, they're coming in from different All-Star. If you get onto that America Kansas City wide, it's linked to Echo Link. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to receive these systems, even if you didn't have a radio with you and you wanted to monitor, let's say, one of these nets. It's very easy to do. So hold the PTT for a good second or two, and even a second at the end of your transmission. And one reason is because they're tied, these bridges are all tied together on some of these rooms, and it can be an issue for somebody else who's on one of these other link systems. So this is where the audience participation comes in about the radios, and at the very end, I'm going to cover the big hitter items. And by the way, so you'll hear me say this again, I am making this out to be much more complicated than it really is, because you're all used to using Fusion. The biggest thing you need to know is that all really WiRES-X does and WiRES-X button does is let you issue a command. Check to see if a room is linked, link a room, or disconnect a room. Other than that, it's all Fusion. It's still all Fusion. That's all you're really using the white is to see whether you're linked into the big WiRES-X network. Anybody have an FT70? Got one right here. Oh, you brought your FT70. So I have always said that I thought that this was a good entry point radio for a new ham, because it's very well built. It does analog and FM, but it also does WiRES-X, and it does Fusion. It doesn't work as a PDN node, but for the price, you can get into digital and analog at the same time, FM. The only thing is that they didn't make the buttons intuitive like the other radios. You don't have a WiRES-X button like you do on a FT5D or an FTM 400, 500. You don't have those buttons. However, I will tell you from using the FT70 and some of the others, when you learn, it's the outer keys that really control all the functionality for it. And this radio does bank scanning too, and not all Yaesu radios do, but that's another big powerful thing for this radio. I actually like how I can save 5 favorites in how they had done the WiRES-X with it. To me, I like the way that it functions compared to some of the other more expensive radios that are out there. So it's a good radio, and it will work fine, issuing WiRES-X commands and seeing what rooms are connected or disconnected. So if you, I can run through this if this is just yours and nobody else has an FT70. I won't spend a lot of time on it. I will just tell you that on the website, and I'll share that with you, or you can go to tinyurl.com/pokewiresx, and that website there's a video. Yeah, there's a video on there for the FT70 and doing the commands on that, because it has, just simply by turning the top dial, a node screen to what you're connected to. So it would say WC4PEM, connecting or connected room screen. So you could see if there's nothing on the CN screen, you're not connected to anything. And C0 is the most recently connected room screen, and C1 through 5 are your favorites, and they're very easy to store. So if you're on a room that you had just entered in, and I really like this America Kansas City wide, I can see myself linking to it. It works like a car, the old car stereos. You just hold the 1 button in or hold the 2 button in, hold it down, and it stores it in either spot 1 through 5. So it's a very simple radio to do. And a lot of this information I have on here is on the website too. So if you're looking for more details on the FT70, check that out. And I have all the commands that are needed to store, to disconnect from a room. And if you're done with WiRES-X, you press and hold down the mode key, and you'll be just restored back to normal Fusion operations, and you take the radio out of WiRES-X mode. I will say it is very easy to use on a 70. And once you start playing around with it, you'll remember which keys are what, whether you have to hit the function key once and hit the AMS. So you hit the function key once, you hit the AMS button, it gets into WiRES-X mode. So, but all this information I have available is online too. Anybody have an FT1D? Probably not. FT2. Like I said, I have all this in for FT3. I have all this information up on the website. And FT5. All right, so the FT5 is a pretty popular radio, and I like it. The screen is very similar to what happens on a 400, a 500. So the same thing. In this particular case, I was on the Bartow repeater. Actually, it was John who was on the Bartow repeater, and he had it linked to the Southeast link, and it tells you on the right on that Southeast link that there were 6 other nodes connected to that. The bigger the number on the far right for which room you're in, the more people and nodes that are connected into it. If that was flashing, that would have told John that was the last room he connected to, but the repeater wasn't connected to anything at that time. And he could either link up to it if he wanted. If he keyed the mic, it would have automatically linked to the last station he was on. That seems to be the one thing that is catching a lot of people. They get into it, and then their last thing that they used was still on there, and they key the mic and it links up to the room. They didn't mean to do it, and they disconnect, don't realize that if you don't want to link to that, you need to get out of WiRES-X and just go back to out of the WiRES-X mode back to regular Fusion mode. So when a local node is found, the X is lit solid, so that upper left-hand corner, the X and the R will show up once you are linked to the node. It will show the name and the city right underneath the WC4PM Bartow that tells you are in WiRES-X and you are connected to that node. If you want to join a room, you can either select a room from one of the following ways. So there's a lot of different ways to get to a room. If you can do it from a node list, like I was mentioning to you before. You can pull up that list and list those out. If you know what room you want to go to, you could enter the node name or room name right in and on the keyboard. But I will say, if you really are trying to quickly get to one, know the DTMF ID for it. I think American Link is 21080. But if it's one you like to use, it's faster sometimes just to hit pound 21080 and then pound in and have it go right to the room you're connecting to. And when you want to disconnect from a room, you just press and hold the band button. Now this is, since we're talking about radio specific here, every radio is a little bit different. So you'll want to kind of learn the idiosyncrasies of your radio. So on some radios, on a microphone, you hold the asterisk button down. On this radio, you press and hold the band button down. That will take you and disconnect you if it was in a room. Talk about etiquette in a little bit too, but if it's already connected to a room, somebody connected it there, don't disconnect it. And if you want to disconnect from WiRES-X, you just press and hold the GMX button for more than 1 second. Press and hold, it'll pop out of it. You'll be back in the Bartow repeater on 145.27 in DN mode. Anybody have a 100? You have a 100? Oh, that's right, you do. Well, you already heard me go through this, so I don't really probably need to spend a lot of time. You want to hear it again? Well, I do. But I do want, because there's some other things at the end that I've tagged on because I had seen folks doing, and I want to cover a little bit. So have you tried joining a room with that radio?
No, because I have the 5 for handheld, and then I have a 500 in the truck.
Okay.
So I just haven't needed to use this radio for. So.
Yeah, and on the 100 is also has some similarities when it comes to, let's say, the FD70. It wasn't super user-friendly on the way the buttons are set up for WiRES-X. Like, to disconnect from room, you press the asterisk, hold down the asterisk key on the microphone. That's similar to some of the other mobile radios. And to disconnect from WiRES-X, you just press and hold the DX button. So, but the display on it is different. And there's a copy of a display up at the top. You'd see WC4PM Bartow underneath, whatever the room. That's the all JA ham room. There's 94 nodes connected on there. You know, I've been tempted to just listen in on there sometime, but there's enough guys from Japan who get on America's Kansas City Wide if you want to chat with some folks there. So FTM 200, anybody? It works very similar to the 300. So when a local node is found, if let's say you tried WiRES-X on the Lake Wales repeater, that red X would not be lit solid. It would eventually just die out and time out because WiRES-X is not connected to it. But in the Bartow machine, the red X will hold solid. To join a room, it's the same thing. You could hit the search button. As soon as you hit search and direct, there are a few options that come up to where you can either enter a name or you can say all, and you'll hear the, you won't hear the package yourself, but I sometimes have back monitored with a analog radio and heard just this long data stream being sent out, and it sends out all the rooms, and you could select from the list. If you get to the bottom of the list, because it only sends so many, 15 or so, and when you get to that bottom one, another data stream gets sent out, and you just continually are sent segments of it until you find a room that you're interested in. Same thing, you can select the most recently connected node or room, or you can specify the DTMF. You can hit the pound key, 21080, pound, boom, it'll connect to AmericaLink. To disconnect, press the asterisk on the microphone and press and hold the DX button when you want to get out of WiRES-X. So once again, the only time you're going to go into WiRES-X is if you want to see it's connected to a room, if you want to connect to a room, or you wanted to disconnect from a room that you had connected to. So
if you disconnect from WiRES-X without disconnecting from the repeater,
the repeater will stay on the room if you don't disconnect, and I was going to mention that too. It's in the etiquette piece. It'll come up here shortly. But so just so you know, there's in the WiRES-X software, which is very easy to configure. The repeater can be configured with a TOT timer, and it's not a transmission timeout timer. It's a room timeout timer. The max is 1 hour. So if you were to connect up to a room and you forgot about it, don't worry about it. You don't have to call somebody you know who's got WiRES-X to disconnect it. It will just disconnect. For some reason, my clicker stopped clicking. Okay, so in many cases on the radios, now we're getting into the FTM 300, and I have an FTM 300. Yeah, so WiRES-X only on the A band. So just remember that. Also, to access WiRES-X, you just press and hold the DX button. So hold it in, you'll see the X start flashing, you'll see a quick transmission go out, wait a second, you'll see another one come back, and then a few seconds later, a little bit longer one comes back, and then your screen will light up just like the screen that's on there. Now in this case, when I did this was my picture of the screen of the FTM 300. Solid X in the corner tells me I'm in WiRES-X. I'm on the WC4PM Bartow. Solid in the bottom was the Eastern Michigan link. When we were having some issues, or we actually had an issue after we had set this up with a known problem, especially for repeater owners who set up DR2Xs and WiRES-X, there's a problem. If you go on to the groups.io for System Fusion, you'll find it had some issues with repeater lockups. It did it once, and it caught right after we set this up. And then luckily, Richard was at the radio shop, and he just went down there and just powered off the repeater and powered it back on. It was fine. But there is a known kind of an issue out there. Some people are experiencing it, some don't. But I have some friends up in Michigan, and I know, and they've got a linked Fusion repeater network up there. It covers a lot of the state on the Eastern Michigan link, and having the chat going back and forth on him. And he says, yeah, they actually have a hard power, either something you can control remotely. Some repeater owners put a timer on it at 1:30 or 1:50 in the morning, have it power off and power back on. That's how it can happen, or else the repeater stays in transmit mode. So not to really not an issue you will have to worry about. But when that Eastern Michigan link was linked solid, I knew that the repeater was linked to that node, and when I keyed up and talked, that I was talking to some of the friends that I have up there. Same thing, you can select a search and direct. On this radio, on the top right knob, you would push that in once. It would bring up the menu for all, and you would click that in. And if you do connect up to a room directly on some radios, you'll see a menu that talks about news and so on. It depends on the network. Just hit the back button, and it'll take it back to where you want to be. But in this particular case, I could have selected search and direct. I could have put up AMER and then press the knob in, and it would have gone, and I would have seen America Link along with a few others that start with AMER also. Or I could hit the pound key 21080. I just remember that as, I think, as America Link, and the pound, and I could connect directly up to that room. So you can use a list or not, or search. Press and hold the asterisk key on the microphone, same thing with the other radios. To disconnect from the room and then to disconnect from WiRES-X, press and hold the DX button. FTM 400, so that one, John sent me a screenshot. He likes to hook up to, there's a room called the Zombie Alert Net. It's actually, I think it's up in Bloomfield, Michigan. A bunch of guys up there have, some of the call signs look familiar that I knew from up in that area. But that is a room he was on. Told him that 7 nodes were connected to it, so he shared his screen with me. You just press and hold. That's got a giant DX button on the left side. You can't miss it. It's red. Just press and hold the DX button. You'll get into WiRES-X mode. In this case, the X is solid with the little green around it. So they did a little bit more with the graphics on this, just like they did on the like on the 991A. Same thing. You could select a room from the list, and you have a little bit different menu on here too. So that arrow button on there, you would press on that, and it will actually bring a menu up, a little bit different menu on that radio. So that's what I was saying. Not all radios are the same in bringing up that list. Some have, the newer ones have the search and direct, like the FTM 500 does, the FTF 5 does. The 400 is a little bit different. It reminds me a lot of the 991A in some ways, but that pressing that down arrow brings up the search menu, so you can bring up the list. So to disconnect,
you do the search on either A or B. On A.
it has to be on the A band. Yeah, everything is on, everything for what you want to do is on the A band on these radios. So disconnect from room, same thing. Press and hold the asterisk key. You'll see it. It'll literally come up and say not connected. And to get out of WiRES-X, just press and hold the DX button once again, and you'll shift back into standard fusion mode. So,
I was going to say, they all kind of look like a D-Star.
Well, so here's where that similarity, as I mentioned, came in. So really, the only reason you're getting into these or doing any of this, it's just like if I have the Bartow D-Star repeater connected up to reflector 30 Charlie, which is very busy, and I wouldn't do because we're going to talk about the etiquette piece in a little bit. But all that, getting into some of the commands on D-Star do, you issue commands to the repeater. It does all the work. Same thing with WiRES-X. As I said, if you joined a net in progress, you wouldn't mess with the radio at all because you're already in digital narrow mode and you're on the Bartow repeater. Just join the net. There's nothing special that you have to do. Just know if you get on at 9:05 p.m. on Saturday that it's the International WiRES-X net, and if you want to check in, check in. The only time you ever want to get into WiRES-X is just to make those commands to connect or disconnect, or to see if it's connected to the network. Once again, on the FTM 500, WiRES-X can use on the A band, that very similar screen. And I'm going to go through what some of these look like. I have some video clips. Press and hold the DX button on the top of the radio. They put the button on this one on the top of the radio. Till that X is solidly lit, it'll have the R there when you're in WiRES-X. Same thing, pull from a list, select a room, or just put in a partial room name, or pound 21080 pound if you know the DTMF code for the room. And like everything I have on my WiRES-X page, there's a links before you get down to the radio specific stuff of how to pull up WiRES ID, WiRES-X node names, room names, or to pull up just a strictly an ID list. Because the first two are only active ones. So there might be somebody you know who has a node, they just don't have it connected up at the time. You could find their number in the WiRES-X ID list on the website. Same thing, press and hold the asterisk key on the microphone to disconnect, and then press and hold the DX button on the top of the radio to get it out of WiRES-X mode. So that, I think, covers most of the 991A. Anybody use a 991A? Actually, it works very good for Fusion. I use that one as well in the house. I like it because when you get into WiRES-X mode, you'll see I'm connected to the WC4PM Bartow, but underneath is the room name. It'll be bright if it was connected to it, dull if it was the last one I was connected to. But see, I've got a favorite button where I can pull up my favorites there. I can click the all button, and then, as I said, that will bring up that big list of all the rooms. I could click the search and direct button, and then use the keypad on the screen and put in a partial room name if I want, or it's got a disconnect button. You don't have to do anything with the microphone because they know on that radio you may have a desk mic or something connected up to it. So you just press that disconnect button. It's just like pressing the asterisk button on the and holding it down on the microphone. To get into WiRES-X mode, though, you'll press the FM list button. Well, on the side to bring up the menus. You may have to scroll left or right on the menus to find it, but you'll find a button in one of your main menus on there has an X, and you press that X, and that will shift you into WiRES-X mode. You can do all the same things, except you've got individual buttons for a lot of those tasks. So I kind of like the way it works on the 991A. They did a really good job with that. To disconnect from you, if you did have a microphone connected, you could press the asterisk key, but they put a disconnect button on the screen. So that's what I use because I don't have a DTM. I've got a high mic connected to mine. So it's an old high mic, and it just works well. And to disconnect from WiRES-X, just hit the back button. So that red back button on the lower left when you're all done with WiRES-X. So they made it a breeze. They really did a good job on that radio.
WiRES-X is only, Fusion is only VHF, right?
Right, yeah, VHF, QHF.
The 991 to VHF.
No, well, that's the Fusion's a whole another story. It can be used, let's say, on 10 meters, up in the above 29 megahertz. But yeah, there's a lot of discussion about that online. But there are people who do use Fusion up on 10 meters. So once you understand the radio specifics of WiRES-X, what rooms are available. So I guess I was right, 21080. So there are popular WiRES-X rooms like America Link. I think John got surprised, W4JFS, that America Link isn't the most popular room on there anymore, and it's become America's KC Wide. And if you search America's KC Wide on Google, they've got their own webpage. They have nets on all week, all sorts of different topics, RV nets, you name it. I mean, they have nets for all sorts of different topics in the mornings and in the evenings. So check it out. That's a nice busy room. Yaesu has an active room list on their website. If you go to their Yaesu site and pull up on the WiRES-X side, you can pull up an active list of rooms. Like I said, on my page, if you go to tinyurl.com/Polk WiRES-X, all one word, no dashes or anything, you'll find I have the links to those active room lists and so on there. Pretty much everything you need to know about WiRES-X. There I was able to search and find N4DLW, he's 21036. That's one, Brandon repeater, Lithia, is on WiRES-X. They link it up on Saturday nights to the International WiRES-X, and occasionally I hear people on it, but it's not very busy. Not as busy as ours is now. So, but you can sort through the list, find the things that you want. It's just like DMR, D-Star, there's all sorts of different places you can connect to. That's what an ActiveX active WiRES-X room list looks like. You can sort by state, sort by county, sort by city, or sort by room name if you're looking for anything specific. You know, some of them they're labeled by particular topics and what they do. This information is on the Yaesu website. And like I said, if you go to Polk, or if you go to tinyurl.com/PolkWiresX, I have links to the ActiveX room list, links to the ActiveX node list, which is different, and then a link to any issued WiRES-X IE. There is something like that on the most popular used rooms, and what I like about it, I don't know if I have it in my favorites on this machine. I can see if I can pull it up real quick. There's a real good one, and the reason I like it is because I found it once, and it has all the popular rooms, Eastern Michigan Link, KC Wide, all those. Because if you missed a net, you could go down that list on the net, click on a specific spot, and it will play back without any pauses, every single transmission that occurred. I mean, I made a mistake when I first found it. I was going out of town, and Cheryl and we have some people staying with us. I went out of town, and I left that tab open in my browser, and the audio was coming out of my monitor, and they thought I left the radio on, and because I didn't realize that even if you weren't like click the play button on, the next transmission started playing. So they really didn't know where it was coming from and then I realized, oh my gosh, this thing will just keep playing. If you didn't have a radio and you wanted to monitor one of these popular rooms, it's there. So it's their version of the hose line. I'll see if I can bring that up before we go. So press the WiRES-X button on your radio, connect to a node, use the search features. We talked about the latency and making sure like it's an internet connected system. Not a bad idea to say over when you're done speaking on there because of the link systems. When we're done with the QSO, you know, disconnect from the room when you're done. The etiquette, if the repeater is connected to another room or node, don't change it. It's there for a reason. Somebody's using it. I mentioned the repeater times out, so somebody connected it within the last hour. If you're connected to a room, make contacts as desired and disconnect from the room when you're done. We've had some new people get on D-Star and thought, hey, it'd be a cool idea while they're at work is to listen to 30 Charlie like all day long. Well, the problem is that other people use the repeater. You may hear me connect the Bartow D-Star repeater when I'm in the car, connect it up to talk to a friend of mine in Michigan on 66 Delta, chat with them, great, done, hey, boom, disconnect. And so if you're going to be actively working on a net or there's a net going on and you want to participate, that's great. Go ahead and do it. But don't use it as a way to just constantly monitor the repeater because other people in this room and other people in the county want to use it, including people who've come and visited who are using it every morning to chat back with folks they knew up in Wisconsin or wherever it was. So, yeah, so there's you know, other people want to use it, and we'll talk about that. I always tell people on D-Star, hey, you know, you really like those other reflectors and you want to listen all the time. If you're not going to go to a hose line or something like that and listen to it on the computer, well, then time to buy a hotspot. So don't tie up a repeater just to listen to the other rooms and repeaters in the area. If you want, get a radio that supports PDN mode and run your own little WiRES-X. It does have a timeout timer, so don't be surprised after a preset time, in our case 1 hour, it disconnects. Right now it's set to disconnect to nothing. So it doesn't, you know, it just disconnects and it's not connected to a room. Somewhere down the line, we may want to do like the other West Central Florida fusion repeaters, one at St. Leo, East Pasco, Brandon, maybe have it go to that West Central Florida room. Yeah, and believe me, if you sat all day and listened to the West Central Florida room, it's connected, it's pretty dead. So not that it would be a big deal if we just had it default to that, but maybe somewhere down the road. So what happens is there's an extra piece right underneath the timeout timer. When a room is disconnected, default back to this room. And so that can be done, but probably something later on down the road, something will get communicated out to everybody. As I mentioned, there's popular nets, the ePars net tonight, 8 o'clock, International WiRES-X net Saturdays at 9 o'clock. I realize 9 o'clock is a late time, but I mean, they're trying to appease a large group of folks. And then there's the etiquette. Just be wary that other people are using a repeater as well. Back to this access point, you could either be on a repeater on the right, or you can have your own portable digital node station. What I like about Fusion WiRES-X, it's easy. One button to press to go from FM to digital voice. Not spending hours on code plugs. I mean, because the repeater does all the work, and that's the beautiful part of it. You program one channel in, and that's it. As I mentioned, repeater does all the work. Resources that are online, there is a WiRES-X Bible that's out there, and Yaesu has a dedicated site to WiRES-X. Like I said, all this makes this sound more complicated than it really is. It's really just learning the few idiosyncrasies of getting in and out of WiRES-X or disconnecting from a room on your radio, because all it is you're still doing Fusion. Nothing has changed. We're all talking with Fusion. All we're doing is the same if we had landline phones from back in the day and you had an extension phone, you both picked up, well, you both could talk to each other in the house. But if you both wanted to talk to somebody else somewhere else, you had to use the phone to make the connection. So that's what you're doing with WiRES-X. And the local resources, as I mentioned, tinyurl.com/poke WiRES-X. And I update that kind of daily and with some information I'm about to talk to you about. The common questions, I'm not in WiRES-X mode and the node is already connected to a WiRES-X room. Will I still be heard in that room or node? Well, yes, because all WiRES-X is a way to get connected to something. You still use Fusion just to talk through and go out on the repeater. Do I need to disconnect from the room when you're done? Yes, but if you're no longer using it or transmitting on the node you're connected to, you should disconnect. If you forget, does it in 1 hour. What happens when I switch to WiRES-X mode? This handshake takes place. We talked about that. Yeah, you'll get that response back. And then if you start listing rooms, it'll just keep sending you more digital data back to you. And it does this, remember, when nobody else is transmitting.
A little clarity for me here. If say you're talking on the repeater itself, and I hop on, I hear your voice, you're talking to Mike over there, and if I click into WiRES-X, that won't interfere with your conversation. Or will?
No. When, the handshakes will go on. You want to do it. Normally, I leave a little bit of space between my transmission anyway, and you get that data back. And we'd be talking unless we were both looking at our screens. We wouldn't know if we kind of quick keyed on you or whatever. Then you might not get that data back, in time. But most of us leave a decent gap in between transmissions anyway, so you wouldn't bother us at all. Do you need this? This is what John Kruk from Yaesu really wanted me to kind of get across to everybody. Do you need to register on the WiRES-X system? Some of you know DMR, you got to register. D-Star, you register. If you don't, you're only heard on the local repeater and you can't be heard on the network. No, you do not need to register for WiRES-X. If you have a radio, a Fusion radio, you're not going to be making your own personal digital node. You're just going to be connecting on to the Bartow or some other machine when you're traveling. No registration necessary. Your radio, just as long as you got your call sign into the radio, and it makes you do that when you first get it, you can get on and use WiRES-X. When would you have to register? Only in the case if you're going to use that device as a PDN, or you buy an HRI 200, which is gives you some other capabilities on the network. That's the only time you're going to need to register. If you're not going to be using your device on the network, don't register, because I say it could take 1 to 4 weeks for a node number to be issued. He's quoting, originally it could have taken a couple of days. Originally, and what he quoted me a handcation was 5 to 7 Japanese business days. I say Japanese business days because there's one guy at Yaesu Musen in Tokyo who is handling these. Now, why the delay? And he mentioned 5 to 7 business days. Well, my first one took 23 days. And then there was an issue. And he said it mainly because they have to review these. So what happens is you have a lot of people sending these in, and when I have some data on there to talk about it, but I calculated that they get about 31 of these a day. Now this guy takes time off, and he might be sick or something. You never know. But he's got other things to do too, I'm sure. But there's at least on average what I figure about 31 of these that come in a day. Now what happens is, and why he's asking me to tell you not to register something you're not going to use as a PDN, because it's one more registration that's got to be used. And if you're not going to use it, well, all you're doing is tying up somebody who really is going to need to use it. And the other is that they get bad information. People put bad information, and this guy sits and he goes, "Oh, Grant, W2BF he put in here, but I went to QRZ and it says Grant, but his real name is Herbert." And oh nope, denied, and boom, and then on to the next one. They throw yours out. Whatever you have in your FCC license as a name, or in QRZ, all as well. That's where they're going to check, and if that information isn't correct, out the door yours go. And he has to sit through those. So to do those. So they're trying to keep the integrity of the network there by making sure that all the information is accurate. Another thing you can do when you're traveling is that if you wanted to connect back to the Bartow repeater, if you happen to be on a WiRES-X repeater somewhere else in the US, you can connect to the Bartow repeater node number 94102. And so we've had times when Kevin, AJ4IYZ, yeah, so Kevin has connected up to, he's connected up just like now, he connects up to that WiRES-X repeater, and he'll connect directly up to the node, and we can talk to him here just like he's on the local repeater. So that's kind of a cool function. Just remember 94102. If the repeater's connected to a room, it's going to stop because it's already connected to some. It's going to stop him from connecting to the room. Yeah. Multiple. Yeah, you could. No, we're going to talk about that in a little bit, because working on something now to kind of have a room that isn't linked to, and maybe it's what we default to in the end, but kind of for us to use here in Polk County, and that's not linked to the EPARS group or whatever. It's a separate room that we can use it. We could just tell people to use that and connect up the repeater to that room instead. So that's something else I'm kind of working on background. That's the reason about this other application that I literally got an approval on 2 days ago. And then finally the number showed up on the screen today, but it's still not in the main WiRES-X server. So there are things that happen on that side. I don't know. I've had to have him go the first time and look into, and I'm going to have to ask him now what's going on. That I got the email, go ahead and do it. And then you can see the ID in the list, but it's not in the server. So it's not a perfect process, but once it's in the system and it's done, you're good to go. So, but only one at a time connected to a repeater node, unless that repeater is connected to a room. And that's when you can have other people kind of join in and do that thing. So it's something we're working on.
Bartow or whatever fusion. When you're here,
correct.
That room,
right.
When you disconnect, etiquette is if you're the only one you connected it, you are using it, and you're done. Disconnect. You want to disconnect.
Correct.
Unless you connect and you realize somebody else has already connected it. So you're just going to get out of WiRES-X, not just.
Right. Yeah. If it's already connected, let's say for that international WiRES-X net, you get it, just leave it alone, and just participate in the net and whatever.
Sure, accidentally.
It's right. Well, that's happened because we're going to talk about something real quick. So this is where I'm kind of trying to demystify some of this. As I said, I've made it sound like a lot more complicated than it is, but the simplistic part is the repeater does all the work. So when you're entering you're going to get into WiRES-X. This is on the FTM 500. You press down on the button, it goes out, sends a quick handshake, and then back comes the data from the repeater. And boop, you're in WiRES-X mode. That flashing America link, that's the last place I connected to. That tells me that the repeater is not currently linked to anything. If I keyed the mic at this point, and this is where a lot of people were doing, if I keyed the mic at that point, it would reconnect to America Link. So I noticed that people were doing it, and they might have been confused. If you got on and it wasn't connected to anything, you didn't want to connect to anything, then get out of WiRES-X and go back into, where your radio looks like it's back in normal fusion mode. So that's a common mistake I was seeing after the initial talk with folks, and they start playing. Get on there. You can't do any harm. Get on there, play with it. It's now on there, and that's what everybody wanted in both clubs. So get on there. If you got any questions, ask, but it's just as simple as that. You're either connecting up to see if anybody's connected, connect to a room, or disconnect from a room. Now, if the repeater is currently linked to a room, that will stay solid, just like it is now. And I don't know, we might be able to hear this or not, but I don't even know if this is even on, or whether or not, it's not important, but the in this particular case, there was W8MJC Mike on the Eastern Michigan link was talking. The Eastern Michigan link part is solid. That tells me that the repeater is connected. Well, obviously it is because I'm hearing him, but if you happen to pop on there and you see some call signs from out of the area you're not familiar with, chances are it's already connected to something. Now, in this case, if it's already linked to WiRES-X and I just happened to get on the repeater and didn't go into WiRES-X mode, so I don't know at this point. I just turn my radio on, and that's what I see. I'm in my normal memory mode and a digital narrow, but I know I can tell it's connected to a room because I hear the other guys talking, whatever. I could wait until there was a break, hold down the WiRES-X key, and it'll come back and it'll tell me which room it's connected to. But if it's one of those nights like tonight or Saturday night, well, then you would know pretty much what it's. So if you're already connected to a room, and I was connected to Eastern Michigan Link, if it's currently linked and I want to unlink it, press and hold that asterisk button, boom, not connected pops up, and then Eastern Michigan Link flashes because that's the last room I connected to, and it'll flash and it tells me it's not connected any longer. If I keyed the mic right now, it'll reconnect back up to Eastern Michigan Link. So what I've done too is, because of the timeout timer, when we first started doing the WiRES-X net, International WiRES-X net, or VPARS net, if nobody's transmitted or done anything to it, I know it's about the hour mark. I'm already sitting on this screen waiting. In fact, Daryl had just checked in on the EPARS net. He didn't know what happened, but it quickly disconnected, and I just clicked the mic and it quickly reconnected back up to the room, and he didn't know any different. So it was just at that hour-long timeout timer point. You can take that, can be turned off. It's just if everybody remembers to disconnect the room. But most of the nets, hour, sometimes some will go an hour and a half.
The only repeat we got was the next one.
Yeah.
The other fusion repeater, fusion.
Strictly fusion only. They're only local. They're not connected to the internet at all. Yep. So, but this one here gives you the ability to be able to connect up with other hams. And like I said, a 10-year-old new ham, he and his sister got their license about the same time. I think his ended with a Z. It was like his ended with a something Z, and then she got the next one with into the next grouping. So, but and they're able to talk to other people in other places. It's a great place if you want to chat with other folks, and maybe you're in an apartment somewhere, whatever. WiRES-X is a good opportunity to do that, and Yaesu makes the radios very easy, easy functionality to do that. So, any questions? I'll try and see if I can bring up that. If I have that link stored in this machine, I had to wipe. So it's Ham Radio Solutions. This is the group that does this. It's NDR .hamradio.solutions, and then it's /NDR. So what happens is, and I can click on the Kansas City wide. There's somebody talking on there now, and play whatever the last transmission was.
Signals around. I saw you're seeing a couple cannot hear. Maybe you driving car.